Okay, awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our Career Insights panel on sustainability and careers within that particular industry. My name is Jorales Canales. I'm an advisor and program coordinator at Beyond Barnard, and I also lead the Career Insights panels, our series at Beyond Barnard. This is our second to last Career Insights panel, so I'm really excited to get started on this and hear from all of our wonderful Barnard graduates that we have here today. We will have a portion on Q&A at the end of our program. So as we are hearing from our Barnard alums, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to share it in the chat and also unmute yourself at the end of our program. And I really encourage you all to take advantage of all the wisdom that we have here today and really get your answers, your burning, questions answered from our wonderful alums here. So without further ado, I am going to get us started. And I just want to open it up by hearing from some of our panelists, or all of our panelists, on how did you get into the career that you are today? Give a little bit of an introduction on yourself and what you do for a living. So I'm going to have Molly, if you can start us off, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Great, thanks, Jorales. Hi, everyone. I'm Molly Ernst Alper. I'm Barnard 08. And I actually, at Barnard, I majored in human rights and Latin American studies. So that was my background at Barnard. And I currently am at Unilever. I'm on the social sustainability team. So I'm actually on the team the global human rights team. I'm sure we all have various sustainability titles in this space. So I'm on the team that oversees the global human rights strategy for Unilever across markets, brands, etc. Unilever is a large consumer goods company. I started out in apparel, actually. So I actually started out at Eileen Fisher in their social consciousness department, and then was at PVH for many years before switching over to the CPG space. I'll pass it off to someone else to do the intro.
Awesome. Thank you, Molly. Zoe Ann, you're next on my screen. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, I'm Zoe Dansdale. I am Barnard 2021, actually, so just 1 year out. Definitely doesn't feel like it's been very long. While at Barnard, I studied Middle Eastern studies and environmental science and really studied the Middle East kind of through the lens of climate change. And have stuck with sustainability, obviously, since graduating. I am at a startup called Changing Room, and I'm the head of sustainability research there. And at Changing Room, we've developed a kind of honey-like Chrome web extension that gives you a sustainability rating of any kind of online products that you're looking at in fashion, and then routes you towards a more sustainable option. So I've been there since November. It's really wonderful. We just launched our Chrome extension about 3 weeks ago now, which is very exciting. And on the side, I also have been doing with a former boss of mine kind of sustainability consulting work, freelance, writing a lot of big research reports for different organizations. So very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Zoe Ann. And I'm already very intrigued at the kind of the variety of careers that we're seeing within sustainability, and I'm sure that'll come up in our conversation today. Sarah, share a little bit about you.
Well, I'm the grandmother in the room. I'm Barnard class of 80, and actually I'm a great aunt, not a grandmother. My degree was in French language and literature, and I bounced around with moves and some health issues for the first 10, 15 years after graduating. And then when I became a mother, I became driven by the climate crisis, and I changed careers entirely. I took an entry-level position out on the east end of Long Island in a land planning and conservation private office. And over the course of the next 20 years, I became a certified land use planner with the American Planning Association and pivoted into land conservation planning. I work now as, my title is Planning and Sustainability. I'm at Sylvester Manor Educational Farm, which is an intact northern plantation remnant. We look at the 3 E's of sustainability: environment, economics, and equity. And we work very hard to elevate the story of all those who built this country and who built the wealth at this particular 235-acre site, where we're doing sustainable agriculture and a robust history and heritage program, naming and celebrating the enslaved Africans and indentured and enslaved indigenous people who lived here for millennia and then centuries toiling. And I look forward to talking about what it's like to be a land use planner in complex regulatory settings where we have opportunities to model new ways, a paradigm shift in order to reverse the worst effects of climate change.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I really am glad that you're able to make it today. I know something that we talked about and something that we will touch on during the rest of the panel is that there is no linear career trajectory, right? You can end up in sustainability and make a career switch. And that's something I'm really glad that we have your perspective here today. And also the variety of majors that I'm seeing here on the panel is just awesome. And there is no one linear path. So I'm going to pass it over to Francesca, our last final panelist for today. Introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Francesca. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a class of 2021. So it's good to be virtually back at Barnard. I majored in urban studies with a specialization in environment sustainability and minor in women's gender and sexuality studies. And my kind of background prior to the role that I'm in now was in philanthropy and nonprofit operations, grants management, social work, and environmental education. So quite a varied background. I'm currently working at the Climate Group, which is an international climate policy and business nonprofit. We have offices in London, New York, India, Amsterdam, and China. And I currently work for the Under 2 Coalition. That is the largest network of states and regions committed to meeting the goals of the Paris Climate Accords. And Climate Group is the secretariat for that network. So my kind of main responsibilities are government engagement, program design and development, and I'm specifically focusing on our building out our just transition work stream, as well as raising ambition in the Midwest right now. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing. So we're going to get a little bit deeper into, what you do now that we have a picture and kind of like the day-to-day aspects of your positions. And so the question I have for our panelists today is, what are some key skills and/or competencies that are essential to your field or the career that you're in currently? And anyone can get us started on this.
I can start if anyone wants to jump in. I think one thing that's interesting seeing across all of our career paths is it's really important, I think, especially today, to recognize that there are so many interconnections between climate and sustainability and every other field. I always tell other students that I talk to and people who are interested in this work that any role can be a climate role. And so it's really important to have the kind of interdisciplinary analysis skills and creativity to identify those connections across not only climate related topics and issues, but also society, economy, history, all these other kind of topics that you wouldn't necessarily associate with climate. So being able to view things in a very holistic and creative way, I think, is a really key asset, especially that Barnard students oftentimes do quite well. And I think it's really, really applicable in this field, especially now.
Yeah, I was going to say essentially the exact same thing. I think that, mentioning how different all of our different majors were when we were at Barnard and the different paths that we kind of took to get to the industries or careers that we have now really is a testament to the fact that being able to think across different, periods of time, different geographic areas, different fields is pretty essential. And like Francesca was saying, everything is connected to climate at the end of the day, and more so now. So for me, yeah, being able to really think and speak across different issues, but always keep them somehow connected to climate, has been probably one of the most important things that I've learned and kind of used as I've gone through the professional world.
I would add that although French language and literature doesn't seem like a path to the work that I do now, communication has been an absolute critical component of what I've been able to accomplish at Sylvester Manor and in all the conservation projects that I've done to date. We need to connect individually with people. People are individually anxious and worried about the future, and the more authentic and candid we can be about where we're coming from and what we're seeking in a given conversation, the more effective I've been able to be. And one of the, the basic skills or competencies I think that has enabled me to bring very challenging and sometimes unprecedented projects to fruition is just connecting with people. So, when you call an office and you're needing to get the boss to authorize somebody to come and install a well on a very tight timeline, connecting with the person who answers the phone, finding out who they are, what their concerns are, what their day is like. I mean, I'm not talking about wasting time, but human to human, working with, working to meet people's needs, even in a conversation, picking up on whether they sound really worried or being respectful, and building those human relationships is a powerful way to get to yes, especially when you're trying to do things that are new, different, and working within a regulatory framework as I do, that is, pretty much weighted towards the way things have always been done. If we're going to change the way things are done going forward, we need to be very clear about our intentions, our needs, and be intuitive and sensitive to the person on the other end of the project that you're dealing with, what their needs and intentions are as well. That's a kind of a soft skill that I have found to be incredibly powerful in yes.
Yeah, I would just build on that, this idea of just knowing your audience, definitely in the corporate space. You just need to really know who you're speaking to. And again, to Sarah's point, knowing their needs, knowing what is challenging them. If you're speaking to somebody in procurement or supply chain, their challenges are going to be different than speaking to somebody in comms or, in communications or marketing or in the brand. And so it's really just being able to adapt and know who you're speaking to and speak to them, not at them, particularly with more challenging topics. Human rights is not an easy topic to ever be speaking about, neither is climate, but it really is the less sexy one of the sustainability topics. And it doesn't have the same return on investment, right? Doesn't have the same tangible return on investment that you may see in other areas of sustainability. And so, you really have to be persistent, but understanding, and again, knowing your audience. And I would just say, particularly in the corporate world, but also I would say in nonprofits too, you have to be adaptable and open to change. You're generally working, even though sustainability is such a big topic right now, you're working on very small teams, doing a lot of different stuff. The world is just changing so fast and things are happening so fast, that what your targets or your plan is in January, it may be different by May. And you just have to be able to pivot and go with it. So I think I think we're all actually speaking a lot about the soft skills. I would say data. If anyone is into data, You are definitely going to say sustainability, and particularly on the human rights side. There's just not enough. We don't have as much data mined on the social side of sustainability. So I would say data is an amazing tool. It's fast rising in its necessity of, with ESG being the new term, with investors really starting to pay much more attention, but not really knowing how to measure. So data is critical, and being comfortable with it, even if you're not an expert, being comfortable with it and being comfortable with technology.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I think there were so many important points that were kind of touched on. And Sarah had mentioned, having a background or a liberal arts degree, right? Like sometimes we don't think it necessarily leads into sustainability, but again, the sustainability is such a broad and wide field. And I think, like Molly had mentioned, ESG is something that is popping up currently and on trend. And we do have a somewhat narrow kind of view of what you can do within sustainability. I think one of those being consulting. And I think that is kind of what is like hot in terms of jobs right now and careers within sustainability. But just by, everything that you all had mentioned, there are common themes and some things that soft skills that you really get from a Barnard degree. And I always, at least at Beyond Barnard, we try to tell students that is something you can utilize as you go on in your career search. So thank you all so much for sharing that. So we're going to kind of switch a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about networking. This panel right here is kind of what I like to say a low level kind of networking, right? You're connecting with Barnard graduates, and it's really a great opportunity to get a better sense of what is out there. So I'd like to hear from all of you if what role, if any, has networking played in your career development?
I can go first. I would say it's played a huge role. The woman that I work with doing kind of freelance on the side, writing and research, I met at a communal table at a restaurant my freshman year at Barnard because my dad started talking to her dad. They were there for a birthday dinner, and then she and I connected, and we've been working together for about 4 years now. And she's turned into probably like one of the greatest mentors and also friends at this point that I've had so far. So that, that was over a dinner table in a restaurant, but networking nonetheless. And then very similarly, kind of the way that I found Changing Room was through mutual friends and a love of clothes and sustainability. And the founder, Jeremy and I just got talking about clothing and how you can kind of balance loving clothes and fashion and also being sustainable. And it's something that's difficult to do, but we both care a lot about it. And from there, we built kind of a professional relationship. So it is very, very important. And I would also say that you never really know when it's going to happen. You never really know who you meet and how they might change kind of your trajectory, you might change theirs. So yeah, just being able to talk about what you really care about with whoever you meet and really kind of getting down into those kinds of things, even if you think it might be a strange time to try and network. It doesn't have to be some stuffy, stiff interaction. It's really about finding common interest.
Yeah, networking is absolutely critical. I mean, I would say my internship at Eileen Fisher, which turned into a job, turned into essentially my career. And, I've stayed friends with so many people who came in and out of, or I came in and out of various companies, yes, absolutely. You have to network. It's how jobs have come up, job offers, it's how recruiting has come up. And also it's beneficial, I think, for you as, not just, getting the job, but also being able to find these new opportunities and knowing more. The more people the more oh, should I work for this company, or no, maybe I shouldn't, or this nonprofit is chaos, or, these are, there's that network is not just about getting the next job or getting the next opportunity, but really just knowing also what's out there. And it's very, very exciting to have conversations. Even like this panel is awesome. I know no one else on this panel, and I'm already so inspired and so reinvigorated that it's just really great to have those conversations. And this is coming from somebody, I am a inherent introvert. I'm very shy. I do not like going places alone or showing up and having conversations. It's not in my nature to do that. So it was something that for me, particularly as a Barnard student, I probably didn't do enough of it. And it took a lot to overcome that. So for anybody who it feels really daunting, it can be, but just keep doing it as much as you can to get through that kind of like social anxiety piece of it.
I can riff off of that, which is, I think one of the best ways to network is to be curious, genuinely curious about the people that you encounter. And then you can just sort of jump past the part where you have to talk about yourself and ask people what they do. And that has led to, the most surprising and wonderful resources and partnerships. I'm a big believer in scanning the conferences, getting on mailing lists and scanning all the different meetings that are happening. In that sense, the pandemic and Zoom have been a real boon in terms of being able to just broaden the reach, the access, the connectivity that you can have. And again, when you're at a conference, one example is we have a annual granting organization now as a forever partner, because I looked at the names of the people who were attending and I did some research, and then I found a nonprofit, a foundation that was granting in our territory, and I filled out that anonymous form that you can do to express interest to places that don't accept unsolicited contacts, and they wrote back. So just, throwing it out there. You never do know, and you're going to have a small percentage of responses, but probably bigger than you expect if you just keep putting it out there, what your needs are, what your dreams are. And then when you do get those connections, those opportunities to start a dialogue, make sure you find out again what makes that other person tick, and how you might be able to help them advance towards whatever their goals and intentions are.
Yeah, I think just going off of that, that's something that is really important in networking, is not just asking for help, but offering help. You will find, at least I have found in my kind of academic and professional career, that one connection leads to another, and making sure that even if an opportunity kind of falls through, you always leave in a good place so that you do have those connections to kind of fall back on. For my current role, I applied a day after it closed. I didn't find the listing until the day after the position was closed. And so I just decided to email the hiring manager and say, I am, unfortunately, I just found this listing. I'm very excited about the role. Here's why. I think I'd be a good candidate. Like, let me know if it's still available. It unfortunately was not. But she thanked me for my email. And then 2 months later, out of nowhere, I got another email saying the person we hired didn't work out. We would love for you to come in for an interview. And so treating every interaction, even if it is initially a no, as a potential opportunity in the future is really important. And in the same way, I am going to graduate school at the University of Michigan next year. And I didn't know anyone who'd done the specific program that I was looking into. And so I just poked around on LinkedIn and found a Barnard alum who had graduated from the program a few years earlier. And she gave me really great advice. And then a couple of weeks ago messaged me asking about a role at my organization. So really being cognizant about the give and take of networking, and being very gracious and willing when it comes to giving that back to other people as well is really important.
Yeah, that so many great points you all touched on. I think especially with Molly, that really resonated with me personally. Networking can feel so scary, right? And daunting to students and just people in general. But I think I'm going to reiterate something that Zoe Ann said, and is that networking does not have to be this stuffy, super professional thing. It's really about connecting with other individuals and finding people who can really help you, but also can almost serve as a mentor to you throughout your career path. And it's not just a way to get a job. So all of your perspectives, super inspiring, and I think so helpful for students currently trying to do this. So our next question kind of touches on the equity work, and I think Sarah had touched on this earlier. And I think climate, sustainability, and equity are intertwined in a large sense. So I'd like to hear from you all about the challenges and opportunities. So how do the challenges and opportunities created by diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of play out in your current role?
It's very challenging. I'm a poster child for white privilege, and I'm not comfortable with that at all. And we have one person of color on our staff, and she's very tired of answering all the white colleagues' questions about race and interaction. And I work at a site that is, an intact remnant of a provisioning plantation for the Barbados sugar trade since the 1650s. And we know very vividly about the exploitation, the genocide, the terrible aspects of the founding of this nation and the building of wealth. And I also live in a county, Suffolk County on Long Island, that's one of the most segregated counties today in our country. So I think you just have to find a way to do the work. I've been doing this month the Food Solutions New England Racial Equity Challenge, and learning, very painful data about inequities in public health and opportunity. As a planner, I learned early on that your zip code determines to a great extent your life expectancy and your likelihood of going to prison, and that's just not okay. And that it's planners' jobs really to try to even that playing field. This is the work of centuries behind us and decades ahead. And, there's no one way to do it, but you have to do the work.
Yeah, I would say, particularly working on a global team, you learn a lot about how different countries, I have the US perspective on diversity, inclusion, and I have these terms, and as we write global policies, right, for suppliers, for business partners, really understanding, even the term like unconscious bias, not going to be understood in many, many other countries, even something that I have to explain to European colleagues, right? So it's very interesting to have the global perspective on equity, on diversity. I mean, obviously living wage is a really big topic. It's one that's really big for Unilever. We've made some big commitments around it, global commitments. So it's a constant conversation internally and with suppliers, and that plan, I would say, on something that's not directly in line with the work, but kind of Sarah is touching on, is that the sustainability space, particularly in the US and I would say in Europe, is very white, very, very white. And a lot of leadership is actually white men. And it's very interesting. One could just say, as diplomatically as possible, it's very interesting. So I personally would love to see much more diversity just in this space, and elevating more people of color and just across the space, particularly in the US. It's just far too white.
Yeah, going off of that, as I also work for a global organization, and I think something on our end, that has been really impactful because we work with governments in countries all over the world, is constantly asking ourselves, who is not in the room and who needs to be in the room? And trying to go beyond just inclusion to active and meaningful participation. And we do a lot of engagement activities with our governments where we're asking them what they need. We're asking them what the gaps and opportunities are, and trusting the people who are affected by the issues that you're trying to solve to give you the answers is so important. And it is exactly what we need in this space. There's a lot of top-down kind of solutions that are being dictated by people who aren't actually affected by the issues at hand. And so making sure that you're constantly thinking about who the actual stakeholders are, who are the invisible stakeholders who haven't been consulted, and how can we get the knowledge that already exists out into the world and integrate it into our programs in a meaningful way. And so for me, in the development of our Just Transition workstream, that meant from the very beginning being very intentional and specific, and also developing metrics to back that up, to ensure that we have meaningful participation and representation of global South countries and not just global North, especially given the kind of potential for extractivism and historical legacies of fossil fuel induced environmental health hazards and degradation. It's really important to us to be constantly checking ourselves as we're building out this program, but also have very concrete metrics for who are our governments, what is the numerical breakdown, what is the qualitative breakdown in terms of the extent of their involvement, and if there is an issue with, for example, not being able to recruit from certain regions, not just leaving it and asking ourselves why and what we can do to make it better.
Yeah, I would say likewise, I've worked on a lot of kind of global teams or global projects working with international organizations. And very similarly, right now I'm working on the Pro Blue report for the World Bank, which is kind of their oceans arm. And a lot of that work is done in the global South and low-lying like marine communities. And as obviously a white woman from the US, it can be very easy that I have a skill set and a knowledge base, and I can naturally just gravitate towards focusing on the things that I'm comfortable with. But realizing that you really have to pull yourself back and gain that global lens all the time. And it means that you have to just check yourself. And like Francesca was saying, really do the work to make sure that you're surrounded by people that can help you do that. And that you're actively always trying to ensure that there's all kinds of different voices in the room to really represent what you're trying to do and have the most impact. Yeah, at Changing Room also, I work with a team of people that come from all over the world. And it's been really fascinating, even something as small as what kind of words we use for different kinds of clothing. We, build out all of these different conversations that you can have about the ways in which we think about clothes or anything else. So it's really, really important to ensure that kind of you're surrounding yourself with different people and doing what you can to make sure the spaces that you're in are open to everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate all of your transparency on this. It's an incredibly, I think, complex question, and something that I know it's been in terms of Beyond Barnard on our minds, and how can we expose students to this industry and this field and really get a little bit more diverse, and just it's so important how connected equity and sustainability and climate and those issues are. So I appreciate that. And some of you touched on this a little bit. Oh,
sorry, I just had another thought that I think is really important that connects to the last question about networking.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, as all students of Barnard, which has done a lot of work and does a lot of work to be a very diverse place, it remains a relatively white space and privileged space, as most higher education is. And so when you are networking, I think that something to be very aware of is that if, because of where you are situated in the world, or the spaces that you frequent are largely white, wealthy spaces, that is just something to be aware of. And that, who you network with can, like we were saying, really determine the spaces that you move into. So it's not just in the workplace, but it is, even from before, and ensuring that you are doing the work to get into spaces that you might not necessarily have access to from the get-go.
I have an addendum as well, which is assumptions are made all the time when you meet people, and the assumptions about our background and education and privilege can be an obstacle to starting those genuine dialogues. Thinking about diversity in my particular community, we have a couple of people who are not always in the room, which is the local longtime year-round community who are struggling to keep the little bit that they have here in this East End of Long Island next to the Hamptons community. And then the new shadow class of workers, some of them undocumented, who are also, very underrepresented, underheard, and overlooked. So there's a lot of work we can do in a very local sense, also, whether it's professionally in the workplace or in our communities, to try to overcome the assumptions that are made about us, and to build genuine relationships with people who don't come from the same backgrounds.
Absolutely. This actually perfectly kind of segues into the next question that we have for our panelists, which is, how have your visible and invisible identities played out in your career this far? And I think I heard some themes so far from our panelists. So if y'all wanted to kind of expand on that, that would be great. So.
Yeah, so a lot of the reason why I'm in this space to begin with has to do with my experience pre and post chronic illness. So I have multiple disabilities. I was diagnosed with my disabilities partway through my undergraduate career at Barnard and took 2 years off of medical leave. So I really had to reconcile with the fact that a lot of the environmental work that I was doing before, like going to protests, organizing sit-ins, doing all these things that were no longer accessible to me, it felt like I didn't have anything to offer to the environmental movement or the environmental field anymore, because I couldn't, engage in these kind of civic actions. I couldn't go out into the field and do extensive field work for hours at a time. And so I had always been very, very passionate about environmental justice. And this kind of experience made me think about the fact that disability is not mentioned at all when it comes to sustainability and environmental justice, even though disabled people are incredibly vulnerable to climate change related impacts, and the kind of intersection of environmental health and the issues of marginalization on the basis of race and socioeconomic status that we were talking about before are really integral and not something that's talked about enough. So I think for me, because I have a lot of privilege in most other areas of my life, and because I appear outwardly able-bodied, it's been quite important for me to, in whatever spaces I'm in, be very open about my disability, the way that I need to work, the perspectives that I bring that are not necessarily there to begin with, but also creating spaces for other people who share similar experiences to be involved. And so I think kind of going off of that as well, regardless of if you have a disability or not, this work is very taxing. It can be very emotionally draining. And so one thing that I've really had to learn, both from a physical and an emotional sense, is that I cannot do this work if I don't take care of myself. Like, climate anxiety is real, burnout is real. And so making sure that you have a very strong network of people, both colleagues and friends and academic mentors, who understand the toll that this work can take, has been crucial. And allowing myself to focus on the future I'm working towards and imagine a better future that I'm working towards, while also being motivated by the things that I want to change, has been a difficult balance. But being able to rely on other people who are as committed to this work as I am has been really, really integral to being able to continue in this space. So I just really recommend that you find your people and you rely on them when you need, and you ask for help when you need as well.
Well, I'm going to jump in as someone who really never saw herself in the pages of Barnard magazine. I'm an adult child of alcoholics, And I came to my undergraduate years without a clue or tools to make it as an adult. And that did make things very difficult for me. Add an injury that left me with chronic pain and a spinal surgery in my late 20s. And I really was lost in many regards. So I had to find the support networks, the Adult Children of Alcoholics 12-step program, and eventually come back to myself. So I would say to all of you young graduates to be who are listening, be patient with yourself and do the work to figure out what's not working for you. I'm a survivor of some difficult things, and a very grateful and joyous and love-filled survivor. And it did take me until my 40s, but that's when I figured out that all that time I spent in the woods as a child, being raised by Mother Earth, quite literally, was my passion. That indicated to me what I wanted to do with my time here, is build towards that future based on hope and resilience. I'm right now working on Paul Hawken's Regeneration book, the Solving the Climate Crisis in One Generation, and it's, you have to go to where the resources are, find those things that support you, and not worry too much about outcomes. I follow Joanna Macy, and she said she had an epiphany when she realized she would never know the impact of her work, and no longer had the need to know. You just put those ripples out there, do the work, and we can't know how we're impacting people or helping to bring about this shift that's so crucial. And so hang in there. We're all survivors of one thing and another, and now we're all surviving day to day in this very challenging global story that we're a big part of. So yeah, keep on keeping on. And I will just say to Francesca, as we work to make this historic site that was privately owned for just until 2014 truly accessible, we are trying very hard to remember the differently abled people among us, and make this place truly, genuinely accessible, and a place where everyone can participate in the beauty and the nourishment of a very, very special particular spot on Earth.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say that I don't know if this necessarily counts as a visible or invisible identity, but I think imposter syndrome is something that honestly I didn't feel like was talked about enough when I was at Barnard. It can be really debilitating and really, really awful to feel as though you don't belong for whatever reason it is. And it doesn't just go away once you get your diploma. It definitely continues when you're in the workforce, wherever you are. And particularly if you're, maybe the youngest person in the room, if you're the only woman, if you are maybe the only person of color in the room, all of those things obviously will really, really feed into that. But like Francesca was saying, really finding people that you can be candid about this with, and can kind of back you up and tell you, you do deserve to be here. You wouldn't be here if you didn't deserve to be here. Is really, really important. And just, be gentle with yourself when you are feeling those ways, because everybody does at some point or another. Even the people that you think have it all figured out definitely don't. And I think, I didn't really hear that enough or understand that enough when I was going through college, and still something I have to remind myself of today. So.
I think everyone has already spoken so eloquently and beautifully. I would just say, also something particularly for myself in the space that I am, being a white privileged woman, is always constantly reminding myself of that, not to make myself, pity or any, but just to remind myself that this is my perspective and to keep myself open to others. So I, try very hard to curate what I'm reading and diversify what I consume social media wise, news wise, Just make sure that I'm kind of pushing against that little bubble that I could very easily stay in. So.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your perspectives. I think just the idea of intersectionality just plays so, it plays into all kinds of different industries and careers, but especially within sustainability. And I really appreciate you all kind of sharing your insight on that, because there are definitely a lot of identities that are often forgotten. If you're neurodivergent, I think that is something that kind of flies under the radar a lot of the time. And yeah, it's just something that we like to open up the conversation about. So we are approaching the last 10 minutes of our panel, which is crazy to me. I want to leave some room for students if they have questions. So students, if you're still with us, put in some questions in the chat, start thinking of some things that you want to ask our panelists. And while you're thinking, I'm going to pose this final question to everyone here today. What advice would you give to a Barnard student who wants to enter your field?
Network. Have the conversations, go to the conferences. I would also say you're a student, and that's actually very valuable position to be in, because you're a student. And so when people are more likely to respond to you if you do a cold LinkedIn email or get connected, because we like helping students. I think there's just a natural, and you're not, yes, we know eventually, if I have an internship or a job, but there's just something very easy about connecting to students. And so take advantage of, if you're working on a research paper or something, just put yourself out there. The worst that can happen is somebody's not going to respond to you, but really, really leverage being a student and exploring, and use summers to do internships and explore what you want to do. And also, it's okay to learn what you don't want to do. That's equally as valuable as finding your dream job or your dream space, because that dream may not be it, and that's okay. And just having these different experiences will also teach you about different leadership styles, different organizations, where you want to work, what you want to do. So you have a lot of value to bring.
Yeah, definitely. Just to reiterate a little bit of what Molly said, cast a wide net while you guys are still in school. Like, take as many classes as you possibly can that maybe relate, but will give you an entirely new perspective on what you're actually studying. Like I said, and all of us have said at some point, having a really interdisciplinary mind is kind of the most valuable thing I think you can have in this field, and probably any field, really. Specialization is really important, but it really, really helps you to be able to bring in information from all over the place. So, read different publications, read articles, every day that maybe you wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards. And yeah, take advantage of being at school. I already miss being at school, and I'm grad school. I'm like, it has to happen, because I just really miss being in an academic setting. So yeah, take all those classes. And I just saw somebody ask class suggestions. One class I took my senior year that really changed my thinking was called Earth and Human Interactions. It was over Zoom, very strange time, but just really changed the way in which I think about time scale in terms of climate change and kind of my own impact as a human. And I've used the readings that I did there and the conversations that we had probably, every day almost. It really, really impacted the way I think. So that would be my one suggestion.
Based on my unusual experience of starting over again mid-career, I would say be willing to volunteer, and also be willing to start entry level. And both of those things led to everything that has followed for me. I mean, I went back to $13.50 an hour job in 2000. And I never would have dreamed that it would bring me to the opportunities that I've had today.
Yeah, going off of that, I think don't be afraid to pitch yourself in spaces that you don't necessarily think you belong in. Like, I think that there's a lot, especially as an undergrad or recent graduate, there's a lot of fear of, am I actually qualified for this job? Do I actually have the skills? Am I going to make a fool of myself? And really just trusting that you have something unique and important to offer and identifying what those very specific skills are. Even if you, like me, come from a non-traditional, non-STEM background, that in itself is a huge strength and is one of the reasons why I was hired in the first place. And so identifying how your differences are actually very helpful and are an advantage compared to maybe some more like traditional backgrounds is really important. And in the same vein, if you come from a very traditional STEM background, taking steps to kind of diversify your experience, whether through, like Sarah was saying, volunteer work or different internships, so that you can bring like a very well-rounded approach. And also just being, having the trust that you will find what you are meant to do and that there's no such thing as a dream job. There's just jobs that you love, and you may have multiple of those throughout your career. I think there's a lot of pressure to know I'm going to do like X, Y, and Z. This is the exact job title I want. When in reality, I think it's really great to be able to experience a lot of different workplaces and roles, and you grow from that. And just knowing that any job can be a climate job. Even if you work as an accountant, you can ask about like what your recycling policies are. Like there's different, you can get into climate and sustainability no matter where you are. So you can trust the process on that.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing. We have a ton of questions in the chat, and Francesca, you touched on something that's just so crucial, and I think it's the idea of a dream job, and especially for careers like this, coming from a social work background, we feel like we have to give 110% of ourselves into our work, or we're not doing enough, and it can be very mentally draining. So just like really echoing what Francesca mentioned about, you can love your job, but not necessarily have it be like the dream job, is your whole reason for existing. And I think it's something that a lot of younger professionals and just professionals in general struggle with. We're going to do our last 5 minutes. We're going to do kind of like a speed round through these questions. I want to make sure we get all of this answered. So question from Bryn, what networking spaces have helped you the most?
There's a group, and mostly they're active on LinkedIn, but there's also an email chain called the Green Jobs Network. It might have a different, can't remember exactly. Anyway, I have found just like a lot of really interesting, both job opportunities, but just, other communities and groups. Like Sarah was saying, different conferences going on. So I would definitely recommend different places like that.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, question from Jamie Ann. So Jamie Ann said, Sarah brought this up already, but was it hard, and is it still hard not to see the impact that you're having within your role in this greater kind of industry or career path?
Yes. Yes, I would say I saw that question, love that question. I think I have an existential crisis probably once a day, wondering why I'm doing this and why did I not just go into finance and make a buttload of money and, live my life to the end. So yeah, it is. I think that's, yes, these are heavy topics of that we're working with, but I think that's kind of one of the biggest is that particularly, if you're working in a larger organization, that you're not necessarily seeing that tangible change. I have to constantly remind myself and remind our teams, like, even when we're doing audits in suppliers and we find some issues and the supplier remediates those, and even if it's as tiny as making sure doors are unlocked and unblocked, that's actually saving a ton of lives, right? Just in that act alone, it's raising awareness. So you just have to find those small moments, those individual, going back to Sarah's individual interactions and communications, that kind of helps. And then, understand that you are doing bigger things. But those small things are really, really, really important.
It kind of speaks also to the imposter syndrome, which I have to say, it broke my heart to hear that that's still a thing with young Barnard graduates, because we should be over that. You also, we tend to under celebrate the things that we do accomplish, and to be, get a compliment and then say, oh no, well, somebody just deflect. So don't deflect. Own absolutely every small success that you have. You're not imposters. We are doing amazing things in, in very difficult circumstances. So yes, it's hard, but you also, you never know. You never know the impact you're having, and it's bigger than you can ever understand. And furthermore, when you get a compliment, accept it, own it.
Yeah, I would also say surrounding yourself with people that invigorate you, and that, you get excited about the little wins that you're getting, or excited about the potential, as opposed to kind of wallowing in the existential crisis. I found that it's been really, really helpful for me to be surrounded by people that are just as passionate as I am. We definitely help each other through that. So
change is slow, but as rather than measuring the distance, just make sure you're pointed in the right direction. If you're going in the right direction, you really can't expect to influence the speed.
Absolutely. We have 1 minute left, so I think we have time for one more question. And just to mention for the students that are questions we couldn't get to for today, this is just a start of a conversation. You can make an appointment with someone at Beyond Barnard to talk about networking and how you can continue those conversations with Barnard graduates outside of this panel. But this question is from Katie. For recent graduates, what were some helpful things that you did over your summers that kind of helped you prepare for your future and your career path?
I think just looking for opportunities wherever you can find them. I'm sure Zoe had a similar experience in that graduating in the middle of the pandemic is not ideal for trying to find opportunities. And so just being really creative with what you can find. So for example, I had a friend of a friend who graduated from Columbia several years before I came in, who just became the executive director of a informal project-based learning education program based in Texas. And she was looking for someone to help with the summer curriculum. And so I reached out to her and said, hi, I don't have any formal education experience, but I was a TA in environmental science. I'm very passionate about environmental justice. I would love to create a curriculum about that. And I ended up working for her for the whole summer. And that was really integral. And I ended up writing my thesis in part based on that program. So just trying to find whatever you can and not limiting yourself to, a very specific big name or, big organization, because there's lots of opportunities to be found, even in organizations that aren't directly related to sustainability.
I noticed a question about cold emails not getting much responses, and I just wanted to say that try calling. They may be separating the wheat from the chaff by the people who really, really want to find a way in. Even if you're not supposed to call, you have nothing to lose. So be aggressive, get your foot in the door, help yourself stand out in some way or another. And as I said, you got nothing to lose if they're not responding to you anyway. What the heck?
I would also say, do your research. It's very clear when somebody emails you that hasn't even looked at your LinkedIn or looked at the organization that you're at and are just sending a billion emails. Curate what you're doing and make it clear that you actually care and have done the work. That's a very easy way to stand out. And, people don't want to talk to somebody that doesn't seem like they really care. So.
Absolutely. So much. I really, we're a little bit over time. So thank you all for kind of hanging in there and getting through as many questions as possible. And thank you to all of our panelists who joined us today. This has been incredibly insightful, and you all were able to just share so much great information with students. So we really thank you for taking the time with us today. Students, we will be sending you this program afterwards in case you wanted to rewatch it, because there are a lot of like I said, a lot of great information in it. So if you want to like take notes and rewatch it, highly recommend. But I will be in touch. I'll be in touch with our panelists. Again, thank you all so much. And you're more than welcome to reach out to me if you have any additional questions. But other than that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. And panelists, it was so nice to talk with you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.